taken my villa. My daughter gave it to her husband's family. She stated, "This is theirs now. You are not allowed to come." I nodded and grinned. I prepared a surprise for them that they would never forget when they moved in. They were stunned by what unfolded before them. Betrayal had twisted itself into revenge, and justice struck from a place no one expected, altering the course of everything. Before we go on, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling us where you're retuning in from. I slammed my car door shut and grabbed my weekend bag, already picturing the quiet hours ahead by the lake. 3 uninterrupted days at my villa. Exactly what I craved after another exhausting week overseeing the San Diego properties. The 2-hour drive from the city had been worth it just to set eyes again on Lake Tahoe's glassy, blue expanse. But the moment I looked toward the terrace, I knew something was wrong. 2 people in white bathrobes stood there, steaming mugs in hand. My daughter, Kelly, leaned casually against the railing, the sunlight catching in her dark hair. Beside her, her husband, Palmer, shifted awkwardly when our eyes met. "What the hell?" I muttered, my bag slipping from fingers that suddenly felt numb. Kelly straightened, her expression hardening into something I'd never seen before. Not even during her most rebellious teenage years had she looked at me with such icy dismissal. "Dad, you can't stay here," she called, her tone sharp enough to slice the air. "Palmer and I are having a romantic weekend." I blinked, certain I'd misunderstood. This was my villa. My name was on the deed. I'd built my fortune, brick by brick, until I could afford this place. Elizabeth and I had chosen every tile, every fixture, every piece of furniture ourselves. "But Kelly, this is my villa," I began, my voice faltering as I realized how absurd it was to have to explain that to my own daughter. "I don't care." She set her mug down with a sharp clink. "We were here first, and we're not leaving." Palmer murmured something I couldn't make out, but Kelly waved him off. Pulling her robe tighter, she gave me a look that made it clear she wasn't bluffing. "Honey, I drove 2 hours," I said, taking a tentative step toward the door. "I just wanted to spend the weekend here." "Get out and don't bother us," she shot back, her voice rising. "You're just in the way anyway." The words hit like a blow to the chest. In the way. This was my retreat, the place where Elizabeth and I had planned to grow old together, where I still came to feel close to her. I stood frozen, my bag at my feet, staring up at my only child as she glared at me from the terrace of my own home. Palmer avoided my eyes entirely, his face flushed crimson above his robe collar. 28 years old, and my daughter was ordering me off my own property like I was a trespasser. This was the same girl who had once curled up in my lap for bedtime stories, who had called me daddy until she turned 16, who had wept in my arms at her mother's funeral. I could almost hear Elizabeth's voice from years past. "Be patient with her, Fred. She's still grieving." I'd been patient for 3 years. Patient, understanding, always bending to accommodate her moods and demands. And this was the thanks I got. "Fine," I heard myself say, the word tasting bitter. "Fine, I'll go." Bending to pick up my bag, my knees complained at the motion. 62 years old, and my own daughter was treating me like a nuisance. "Good," Kelly called after me. "Next time, call first. Call first, to use my own property." I walked back to my car on shaky legs, each step feeling like a retreat from a battle I hadn't even known I was fighting. Behind me, her voice softened as she spoke to Palmer about their dinner plans. The engine purred to life, dependable German engineering, unlike family. Apparently, in the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of Kelly and Palmer settling back into their chairs, their conversation resuming as though I'd never been there. My daughter lifted her coffee mug, whether in a toast or in farewell, I couldn't tell. The road back to San Diego stretched ahead, long and empty. I drove away in silence, tail between my legs, just as Elizabeth had feared I would. Just as I always did. By Monday evening, I sat alone in my study, a mug of lukewarm coffee beside the remains of a solitary dinner. 3 slow days had passed since that Friday's humiliation. On Saturday, every phone ring had jolted me. expecting Kelly to call with some kind of explanation. By Sunday, I'd begun to realize that maybe I'd always surrendered too easily. Then, the phone rang. "Dad." Kelly's voice carried none of the warmth I had hoped for, only a cool, businesslike tone. "Listen carefully. Palmer and I have decided. The villa now belongs to his parents." My coffee mug froze midair. "What, Kelly? What are you talking about?" "Carl and Margaret Thompson. It's their home now," she said, her words dropping into my mind like stones into deep water. "You're not allowed there anymore." The leather of my chair creaked as I leaned forward. "Kelly, have you lost your mind? You can't just take my property." "Actually, I can. And I am," she snapped. "You hardly use it. And they need proper housing." 30 years of 12-hour days flashed through my head. Every zoning fight, every impossible client, every sacrifice Elizabeth and I had made to afford that dream home. "It's my villa," I said, my voice rising. "I worked 3 decades for that place." Her laugh was sharp and humorless. "You're being selfish. After all we've done for you since Mom died." Something inside me broke. "Everything you've done for me. I paid for your wedding, your car, your college loans, your apartment deposit. That's what fathers do," she cut in. "Besides, you're old and alone. What do you need with such a big villa?" Old and alone. The word struck deep, but instead of crumbling, I felt a steel resolve forming in my chest. Elizabeth's memory whispered patience, but she had never heard our daughter speak with such deliberate cruelty. "Those are Palmer's parents, Kelly. I barely know them. They're family now, and unlike you, they'll appreciate it," she said. My grip tightened on the phone. "No." The silence on the line was heavy. I could almost hear her disbelief. "What did you just say?" "I said no, Kelly. You can't say no to me. That villa's wasted on you." Her composure slipped, revealing something sharper. "Palmer's parents are struggling financially, and you're just hoarding property." The irony burned. I'd been visiting the villa more often since Elizabeth's death, finding comfort in the place we'd loved most. Kelly knew that. "They can find their own housing," I replied evenly. "I can't believe how selfish you've become," she said, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "Mom would be ashamed of you." That crossed the final line. Elizabeth would never have supported this theft. The realization hit me like a cold wave. This was nothing less than the manipulation of a grieving husband as devotion to his only child. "Your mother would be horrified by what you've become," I said softly. I heard Kelly inhale sharply. "How dare you?" I ended the call. For the first time in 3 years, I had hung up on my daughter. The phone rested in my lap, silent, as my heart pounded hard against my ribs. Outside, San Diego's traffic moved in its usual steady hum, but in my study, everything felt irrevocably altered. The phone rang again almost instantly, Kelly's name flashing on the screen. I powered it off. Sleep wouldn't come that night. I stayed in my leather chair long past midnight, replaying her audacious demand over and over. The quiet in the room was no longer soothing. It buzzed with the weight of possibility. By morning, the shift inside me had solidified into something sharper. Tuesday's sunrise brought clarity. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began combing through California property laws with the same calculated precision that had once built my construction business. Statutes, transfer protocols, documentation requirements, material I had mastered decades ago, never expecting I might use it to guard myself against my own child. Texts came in throughout the day, all from Kelly. "Dad, we need to talk about yesterday. Don't be stubborn about this." Finally, "Palmer's parents are coming to see the villa this weekend." I erased them all without reply. On Wednesday morning, I drove downtown to my attorney's office. Marcus Chin had been my go-to for business deals for 15 years, sharp-minded, unfailingly courteous. His corner office overlooked the harbor, where sailboats bobbed across the blue water. "Fred," Marcus greeted warmly, rising to shake my hand. "What can I do for you?" I took my usual seat, the leather still creaking in its familiar spot. "I need advice on protecting property," I said carefully. He tilted his head. "Commercial or residential?" "Residential. The Lake Tahoe villa," I hesitated before adding, someone's trying to claim ownership they have no right to. Family, Marcus asked. The word landed like a diagnosis I didn't want to face. Yes, his expression sobered. That complicates things. Family property disputes can get ugly. What are my options? Several. He picked up a pen and started listing. First, we make sure your ownership records are flawless. Then, we add protective layers. Trusts, LLCs, whatever fits. Timeline depends on complexity. A simple review, a few days. Something more robust, 2 or 3 weeks. I thought of Kelly's last text. Palmer's parents are coming this weekend. I may not have that long. Marcus studied me for a beat, then set his pen down. Fred, is someone trying to push you off your own property? I nodded. His professionalism hardened into resolve. Then we start now. Bring me every document, deeds, transfers, anything tied to the villa's history. I'll have them by tomorrow. Good. And Fred, document everything. Calls, threats, attempts to pressure you. Contemporaneous records carry weight in court. Threats, coercion, legal terms for what my daughter had just tried to do. Riding the elevator down to the garage, I watched the floor numbers tick by, each one carrying me further from the life I'd known a week ago. At the lobby, my reflection stared back from the polished steel. An older man than my 62 years, but with something newly alive in his eyes. Determination. My phone rang as I reached the car. Kelly again. This time, I answered. Finally, she snapped. We need to put an end to this childish nonsense. The only nonsense, I replied evenly, is thinking you can take what's mine. Take? How dare you use that word with me? What else would you call claiming someone's home without permission? Silence stretched before she spoke again, her voice now measured, almost rehearsed. Dad, Palmer's parents are in a bad way. Margaret lost her job. Carl's pension barely covers rent. The sympathy play. One I'd seen before. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't give them any right to my villa. You could be generous. Show some family spirit. Like the family spirit you showed me on Friday. A pause. That was we were just surprised to see you there. At my own property. You should have called first. The logic was dizzying. Kelly, I'm not giving up the villa. That's final. Fine, she said, voice sharp as a whip. But Palmer's parents are still coming Saturday. Their travel is already booked. She hung up. I stood by my car, phone still against my ear, listening to the empty dial tone. Above me, San Diego's sky stretched wide and blue. The same sky that had witnessed decades of my work and sacrifice. Saturday was 4 days away. I lowered the phone, setting it beside a coffee mug on the side table. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, a thin skin forming on top. Outside, the city's traffic hummed on. Inside, the air felt altered. I asked myself the question I'd avoided too long. When had I stopped being her father and become her personal bank? The answers came uninvited. Kelly's wedding 2 years back, $15,000 without a single question asked. Then the SUV, brand new, $25,000, bought in a week when she said Palmer's car had failed. He had thanked me warmly. She had barely looked up from her phone. Elizabeth's voice echoed from memory. Be patient, Fred. She's still grieving. But Elizabeth had been gone 3 years. What remained didn't look like grief. It looked like careful exploitation of a widowed father's need to hold on to his only child. I stood, legs stiff, surrounded by my study walls, lined with awards, photos, and contracts. The record of a man who had built his empire through precision and strategy. That man was still here, and I was done being used. Why had I become so compliant in my personal life? The answer sat in a silver frame on my desk. Elizabeth, caught mid-laugh on our last trip to the villa, her gray hair shining in the Lake Tahoe sun. Since she'd passed 3 years ago, I had said yes to every one of Kelly's requests. Afraid that a no might push away the last bit of family I had. But family didn't take advantage. Family didn't twist grief into a money-making scheme. Kelly's graduate school had cost nearly $40,000 over 2 years, and I had covered every cent, without hesitation, even when she switched majors twice and dragged out her studies. Her thank you calls grew shorter, then disappeared entirely, surfacing only when she wanted more. Pattern recognition had served me well in competitive construction bids and tough negotiations. When I applied the same lens to Kelly's behavior, the truth became obvious. Each request was bigger than the last, each thank you smaller, and every exchange more like a transaction than a conversation. I'd believed I was being a good father. In reality, I'd trained her to view me as a resource, not a person. The clock struck 8, its sharp chime breaking the stillness. In 4 days, Palmer's parents would arrive at my villa, ready to claim a home I had spent 30 years earning. I imagined them with measuring tape and furniture catalogs, planning how to refit my life to suit theirs. Elizabeth's old advice, be patient, had been sound when Kelly's pain was fresh. But grief doesn't last 3 years. Grief doesn't plan a property grab against the person who's been funding your life. Grief doesn't hang up on a father after demanding he hand over his home to strangers. This wasn't grief. It was greed. I lifted Elizabeth's photo, studying her warm smile. She'd adored Kelly, but she had also been the disciplinarian. She would never have accepted this kind of disrespect or dismissal. "What would you want me to do?" I asked the image softly. The reply came in my own voice. "Stop being a victim." Sleep was out of the question. I went through my usual routine shower, brushing my teeth, scanning the sports section from Sunday's paper, but once my head hit the pillow at 11, my brain wouldn't quiet. Instead of counting sheep, I counted days. Monday, April 28th, Tuesday, the 29th, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, May 4th, 6 days. By midnight, I'd abandoned the idea of rest. Lying on my back with my hands clasped behind my head, I stared at the ceiling and approached the problem the way I approached construction contracts. Break it down. Find the critical path. Calculate resources. Set the timeline. Kelly had made a major mistake. She'd given me an exact deadline. In 3 decades of project management, I'd learned that the party who reveals their timeline first usually loses. Sunday, May 4th, meant she was working backward from some fixed factor, most likely Palmer's parents' move or at least expiration. By 12:47 a.m., the solution was forming. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about strategy, and strategy was my domain. Years of dealing with unreasonable clients, tight deadlines, and pushy contractors had taught me how to find leverage points. Rule 1: never negotiate from desperation. Kelly assumed I was desperate to keep our relationship true. For the past 3 years, but desperate men don't hang up on their daughters or hire attorneys. Rule 2: an information edge wins. Kelly thought she knew everything about me. The lonely widower who couldn't say no. She had no idea about my talks with Marcus Chen or the document review already underway. Rule 3: timing is everything. 6 days would feel like a crunch to her, leaving little room for backup plans. For me, it was more than enough to craft something sharp. I remembered Frank Morrison, the developer who tried to muscle me out of the Harbor District project back in '98, using intimidation, legal threats, and rumor campaigns. I'd let him believe he was winning, while quietly locking down his subcontractors. When his schedule collapsed, I was ready with premium-priced solutions. Kelly's move was almost identical. She thought she was cornering me. In reality, she was giving me time to build a trap. My phone buzzed a text from Kelly. "Dad, Palmer's parents found a moving company for Sunday. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." The presumption was staggering. She'd already booked movers for my property. From a business standpoint, her confidence was almost admirably like the deal is done, even if you're bluffing. But I'd seen this ploy before. In 2003, Tony Castellanos arrived at my office with architectural plans for changes to a property he didn't own. He learned the costly difference between confidence and legal ownership. Kelly was about to learn the same. I deleted her message and set the phone down. My mind was moving in a steady, methodical rhythm, the same one that had taken my small contracting firm to a multi-million-dollar operation. Resources, strong finances, legal counsel, 3 decades of contacts. And one hidden advantage, my neighbor Derek's tech expertise. Derek owed me a favor for helping him fix a flooded basement last winter. Timeline: 6 days to execute, Sunday as the finish. Goal: flip the balance of power, not only stopping Kelly's scheme, but making sure she understood the cost of treating me like a victim. Acceptable risks. Calculated by 1:23 a.m. I was smiling in the dark. Elizabeth used to say, I was nice 95% of the time, but that last 5% could be absolutely terrifying. Kelly had never met that side. She was about to. By 2 a.m., my plan was set. Tomorrow, I'd loop in Derek for the technical piece. Wednesday, finalize with Marcus. Thursday and Friday prep, in position. Saturday night, I'd head to Lake Tahoe, playing the accommodating father. But Sunday morning, Kelly would meet a very different Fred Martinez. When Tuesday dawned, the clarity that comes only with decisive action had settled in. I woke at 7, feeling more refreshed than I had in months. After showering and making coffee, I walked over to Derek's place right on the dot at 9 o'clock. He answered the door wearing his standard work-from-home outfit, worn jeans and a t-shirt from some Silicon Valley startup. Behind his wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes had that glazed look of someone who'd been staring at lines of code for hours. "Fred, everything all right?" he asked, stepping aside to let me into his home office. 3 monitors glowed with scrolling programming texts, and the room was cluttered with gadgets and cables. "Actually, I could use your help with a creative tech project," I said, settling into the chair beside his desk. His eyebrows shot up immediately. "What kind of project? You've got my attention already." "Home automation, motion sensors, voice assistants, maybe some special lighting. A surprise for certain unexpected guests." Derek leaned back, eyes lighting up, like a smart haunted house setup. Theatrical meets automation, close enough. Exactly something that leaves a lasting impression. He grinned broadly. "Fred, this is straight out of a horror movie. When do we start?" 2 hours later, we were loading his SUV with enough gear to outfit a tech lab: motion detectors, programmable LED strips, wireless speakers, hidden cameras, water flow controllers, and a tablet loaded with automation software. The drive to Lake Tahoe went quickly as Derek brainstormed. "We can chain reactions together. Motion triggers lights, lights trigger voice responses, voice triggers water systems. The whole place could feel alive." "How advanced can we make it?" I asked. "Unlimited. Motion sensors in every room. Voice assistant with custom scripts. Lights that respond to movement patterns. Heck, we could add facial recognition to target specific people. Let's start with the basics and see how far we get." We arrived at the villa a little after noon. Derek let out a low whistle as we pulled into the driveway. "Beautiful place, Fred. Your mystery guests won't forget this welcome." Once inside, his technical skill became obvious. Within minutes, he'd mapped out sensor placement, identified camera angles, and started programming the control tablet. "Motion detector here in the entryway," he explained, mounting a device no bigger than a smoke alarm. "First trigger living room lights, strobe, while the voice assistant announces, 'You are not the owners of this house. Leave immediately.' And if they ignore it?" I asked. Derek's grin turned wicked. "Phase 2 motion in the living room turns on every faucet and shower in the place. Plus, the voice messages get more intense." We worked steadily, him threading cables behind baseboards, programming response sequences, and testing each feature with obvious enjoyment. "The beauty here," he said while adjusting a hidden bookshelf camera, "is that it's all completely legal. Standard smart home features, just creatively used." By 3 o'clock, every room had at least 2 sensors connected to strobing light patterns. The voice assistant had escalating warning messages. Random water activation followed persistent motion detection. "Let's test it," Derek suggested, tablet in hand. I walked into the living room. Instantly, lights began flashing in a dizzying pattern and a firm voice announced, "This property belongs to Fred Martinez. You are trespassing. Leave now." Derek joined me, grinning. "Keep moving." After 30 seconds, All the lights strobed wildly while the voice escalated. Warning, security system activated. Authorities have been notified. Vacate immediately. At the same time, rushing water echoed from the kitchen and bathrooms. Brilliant, I said, genuinely impressed. He shut the system down, looking pleased. Battery backup means they can't just cut the main breaker. Everything's remote controlled, from your phone cameras, settings, manual overrides. As we packed up, he finally asked, "So when are these mystery guests showing up?" "Sunday morning," I replied, "and they really have no clue." I thought of Kelly's text about movers for my property. Let's just say they plan to make themselves comfortable. Derek laughed. Then they're in for a warm welcome. By Wednesday morning, he was at my door again at 8:30, arms loaded with new gear. "I had some ideas," he announced, producing a compact projector and speaker array. "What if they try killing the main power?" he asked. I'd wondered the same thing the night before. "What do you suggest?" "Industrial batteries hidden in the basement, enough power for a week. And these projectors for wall effects. Shadows, figures. This is going to be legendary." On the drive to Tahoe, he detailed his upgrades, motion-triggered, ghostly projections. Whispering speakers hidden throughout the house. Backup systems that would make the setup nearly impossible to disable. "Your guests," he said as we pulled into the driveway, "are going to think they've walked onto a haunted movie set." We worked with focused intensity. Derek installed projectors in the main rooms, programming them to cast shifting shadows that made the space feel alive. Even in daylight, the figures were unnerving shapes, pacing behind furniture, flickering just outside peripheral vision. "The trick," he explained, while calibrating a unit, "is psychological. People's brains look for patterns. These projections will make them think they're seeing things." Meanwhile, I handled the sound. Derek had brought high-end speakers, barely larger than smoke alarms. His audio library was unsettling footsteps in empty rooms, whispered voices, creaking floors, wind where no window was open. "The system will layer them randomly," he said while fine-tuning. "Sometimes just one sound, sometimes several at once. Keeps them guessing what's real." By midday, we had transformed the once peaceful villa into something straight out of a psychological thriller. The backup battery system, cleverly concealed beneath the main electrical panel, ensured uninterrupted operation, even if someone tried to cut the power. "Should we add a warning sign?" I suggested during our lunch break. "Something that sets the right tone for when they arrive." Derek's eyes lit up. "Brilliant idea. How about, 'Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk'?" It sounds like a tech demo, just mysterious enough. We spent the next hour designing the perfect sign, professional, sleek, and prominently mounted on the front door. To any passerby, it would suggest an advanced smart home showcase. To our unwanted visitors, it would be a clear and legal warning of what awaited inside. The afternoon was dedicated to exhaustive testing and fine-tuning. Derek moved through each room while I monitored the control tablet, watching motion sensors trigger cascading responses across the entire system. "Motion detected in the entryway," Derek called out. Lights pulsed with strobe effects. Projections flickered eerily. Haunting audio sequences played. The villa erupted into a symphony of controlled chaos. Strobing lights flashed in disorienting rhythms as ghostly shadows danced on the walls. The voice assistant issued stern warnings against trespassing, while unsettling whispers seemed to drift from empty corners. Faucets and showers gushed water simultaneously throughout the house. "How long does this whole sequence run?" I asked, genuinely impressed by the seamless coordination. Derek grinned with pride. "The system assumes anyone still inside after the initial warnings is either authorized or just stubborn. It adapts accordingly, triggering new effects every 30 seconds. If they try to hide or stay still." We ran final tests room by room, ensuring flawless integration of sound, projection, and lighting. Motion sensors covered every possible route. The backup power supply stayed invisible, but was fully accessible for maintenance. As evening approached, Derek refined the smartphone interface, giving me full remote control. Live camera feeds, system status updates, manual overrides, all accessible anywhere with an internet connection. This is honestly the most sophisticated home automation project I've ever done, Derek said, reluctantly packing up his tools. Your guests are about to get the surprise of their lives. Standing in the doorway, I took in our handiwork one last time. The villa looked as serene and welcoming as ever on the surface. But beneath that calm exterior lay a technological web ready to respond with relentless, inescapable intensity to any unwelcome visitors. Thank you, Derek. This is absolutely perfect. His laughter echoed through the empty villa as we locked up and parted ways. I almost feel sorry for whoever shows up on Sunday, he said. Almost Sunday, May 4th, the day Kelly had chosen to claim her final victory arrived. At exactly 2:00 p.m., I settled into my study, monitors glowing with live camera feeds from the villa. The peaceful afternoon at Lake Tahoe seemed utterly calm through the high-definition lenses Derek had installed. Birds flitted between pine branches. Sunlight danced on the lake's surface, no hint of the technological trap waiting just beneath the villa's innocent facade. My phone lay next to the keyboard, the home automation app glowing on its screen. Motion sensors were armed, audio cues queued, lighting sequences ready, water controls primed, projection systems loaded with their unsettling choreography. Everything had passed a Wednesday final test flawlessly. Now it was time for the real performance. At 2:28 p.m., a dark blue minivan appeared on the approach road camera, just as Kelly had promised. My daughter's punctuality had always been unwavering, useful for school, devastating in manipulation, perfect for revenge timing. Right on schedule, I murmured, adjusting the monitor angle for the best view. The vehicle pulled into the driveway with casual confidence, as if the occupants owned every stone along the path. Kelly stepped out first, her dark hair catching the afternoon sun as she stretched and scanned what she clearly believed was now her family's property. Palmer climbed out from the driver's seat, already moving to help his parents with their luggage. Carl and Margaret Thompson looked exactly as I'd imagined retirement age. Slightly weathered, yet moving with the eager anticipation of people receiving an unexpected gift. Margaret clutched a large purse and a pair of house slippers, poised to settle comfortably into someone else's home. They worked efficiently, unloading suitcases and boxes from the van, clearly executing a permanent relocation on a weekend visit or temporary stay. Complete takeover of my villa, carried out with the casual confidence of those convinced their victim was too weak to fight back. Kelly pointed animatedly toward the front entrance, speaking to her in-laws. Even through the cameras, her body language radiated triumph and command. Palmer nodded in agreement, glancing up at the villa's windows as if mentally cataloging which rooms his parents might prefer. They approached the front door as a united front four, people absolutely certain of their right to claim my property. Margaret took the lead, her posture that of someone ready to immediately organize household affairs. Then they reached the warning sign. Derek's professionally mounted placard stood proudly beside the entrance. Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk. The message was clear, legally sufficient, impossible to ignore. Margaret stopped first, her face darkening as she read the sign, aloud, her voice captured clearly by the audio pickup Derek had installed near the door. What is this nonsense? Who put up this ridiculous thing? Carl joined her, squinting at the sign with visible irritation. Probably some prankster kid. Just ignore it, Maggie. Kelly's laughter cut sharply through the tension, dismissive. Oh, that's just Dad being weird. He probably thought it was funny or something. Don't worry about it. Palmer shrugged, already reaching for the door handle. The old man's always been a little eccentric. Right, let's just get inside. But Margaret wasn't done. Her face flushed with indignation as she grabbed the sign's mounting bracket and yanked it free from the wall with surprising force. Derek's hour-long professional installation came apart in seconds, the placard crashing to the ground. There, Margaret declared, kicking the fallen sign aside. I won't have some silly warning ruining our first day in our new home. Kelly applauded. Perfect. You're absolutely right, Margaret said with finality. This is your house now. Through my monitors, I watched them step over the destroyed sign and approach the front door, for people who had just demonstrated complete disrespect, not just for my property, but for my rights and boundaries. Fair warning given. Fair warning thrown back with contempt. Palmer inserted the key Kelly had obviously provided, likely copied years ago from a spare I had trusted her with. The lock turned smoothly, the door swung open, and my daughter led Palmer's parents inside like a victorious general, claiming enemy territory. "Make yourselves completely at home," Kelly announced, her voice ringing through the entryway. "This place is yours now." Margaret's delighted gasp echoed through the speaker system. "Oh, it's even more beautiful inside. Kelly, I can't believe how easy this was. Some people are just natural pushovers. But not this time." The moment they crossed the threshold, the motion sensors registered their presence instantly. Red indicators flickered across my monitoring system for distinct targets inside the villa, systems armed and ready. Every technological element primed for activation. I leaned back in my leather chair, finger hovering over the smartphone screen, the one that would deliver their first lesson in respecting other people as property. Not yet. Let them get comfortable first. Exactly at 10 p.m., like clockwork. I watched through the bedroom camera feed as Kelly and Palmer settled into what they believed was their master bedroom. Meanwhile, the guest room monitor showed Carl and Margaret already asleep, exhausted after their day of squatting and claiming my villa. Perfect timing for their technological awakening. My finger hovered over the master activation control Derek had programmed into my phone. One tap would unleash every system we had, carefully woven throughout the house. Motion sensors armed, audio sequences cued, projection systems loaded, water controls prepped. Time for my daughter to understand the difference between a victim and a strategist. I pressed execute. The transformation was instantaneous and magnificent. Every light in the villa exploded into strobing chaos, rapid flashes of red, blue, and white, turning the peaceful bedrooms into disorienting discos. Simultaneously, water erupted from every faucet and showerhead, creating a thunderous symphony of rushing liquid throughout the house. Kelly bolted upright in bed, her silhouette stark against the chaos. Palmer scrambled beside her, their frantic questions swallowed by the relentless assault of sound and light. Then the voice assistant joined the performance. "Attention, unauthorized intrusion detected." The announcement boomed from hidden speakers scattered throughout the villa. "You are not the owners of this house. Leave the premises immediately." Through the guest room camera, I saw Carl and Margaret stumble from their beds in terror. Margaret's scream pierced the audio feed as ghostly shadows began to flicker across the walls, sinister figures gesturing and moving with supernatural purpose. "Carl, do something." Margaret's voice cracked with panic. "I don't understand what's happening," Carl muttered, his words nearly drowned by the water's roar and flashing lights. Derek's programming brilliance revealed itself fully as the systems cascaded in flawless coordination. Motion sensors tracked their frantic movements between rooms, triggering harsher audio warnings and intensifying visual effects. The more they ran, the more aggressive the house became. Kelly appeared in the hallway feed, hair wild and confidence shattered. "This is impossible," she gasped. "Houses don't do this." Palmer stumbled behind her, desperate to find the breaker box. "Where's the main panel? We need to shut this off." But Derek's backup systems were flawless. Even if they found the electrical panel, the hidden batteries kept everything running for days. The villa was technologically autonomous, responsive only to my remote commands. "Warning, security protocols activated." The voice assistant repeated the grim message. "Unauthorized occupants will be removed." Margaret appeared in the living room camera, face twisted in terror as projector-generated shadows danced around her. "This place is haunted. We have to leave." As Palmer reached the front door, the locking sequence activated with a 30-second delay, just enough to spark claustrophobic panic without trapping them indefinitely. "The doors won't open," Palmer shouted, yanking the handle. "What kind of system is this?" Through my monitors, I watched for confident invaders, reduced to terrified, confused victims overwhelmed by technology they couldn't control. Kelly, who had dismissed me as weak, staggered through strobing lights while invisible speakers whispered threats around her. Palmer, who had planned to fix everything, couldn't even conquer a smart lock. The projection system reached its crescendo, filling every wall with eerie, moving figures that seemed to watch and track their panicked movements, combined with the surround sound footsteps, creaking floorboards, winds blowing through closed windows. The villa had become a high-tech haunted house. Carl collapsed into a chair, pale and shaken amid the flashing lights. "We need to get out of here, right now." "I'm trying," Palmer shouted back, still struggling with the door controls. Exactly 6 hours after activation, the automated sequence climaxed. Lights, water, sound, projections, voice warnings all operating simultaneously, flooding their senses to overwhelm any rational thought. Kelly spun in the living room, shadows dancing around her, water gushing from unseen sources. The confident woman who had ordered me off my own property now looked like a lost child trapped in a nightmare of my making. Dawn light filtered through the windows as the locks finally disengaged. Palmer yanked the entrance open, and all four stumbled toward the exits psychologically defeated. My phone rang as they reached their minivan. Kelly's name lit up the display. It was exactly 7:30 a.m., cutting through the morning's fragile calm. I allowed myself a small smile before answering, my voice calm and measured. "Kelly, good morning, sweetheart. How was your night at the villa?" Her reply shattered the silence like breaking glass. "What did you do, you sick, twisted old man?" Her voice cracked with hysteria and exhaustion. "Margaret and Carl are traumatized. They're barely coherent." I adjusted my tone, feigning gentle confusion. "Kelly, what are you talking about? What happened up there? Don't you dare play innocent with me." Her words trembled with rage. The house went completely insane. Lights flashing everywhere, water pouring from every faucet, voices screaming at us to leave. Fascinating. Derek's coordination had worked even better than I'd hoped. "That sounds absolutely terrifying," I said, allowing genuine concern to creep into my voice. "Did you call someone for help?" "We called the police," Kelly replied, voice breaking. "They came at 6 a.m., searched everything, found nothing wrong. Said it was probably just a technical malfunction." "Perfect," I said calmly. "The beauty of smart home technology. Completely legal. Utterly deniable." "Well, that's a relief," she said, voice softening. "At least you know there wasn't any real danger." "Real danger?" Kelly's scream exploded so loudly I had to pull the phone away. "We didn't sleep for 8 hours. Carl collapsed twice. Margaret won't stop crying." I made sympathetic clicking sounds. "I'm so sorry you had such a frightening experience. These modern electronic systems can be unpredictable. Stop mocking us." Desperation shone through her voice, almost musical in its intensity. "This wasn't some random malfunction. We both know it. Kelly, I'm genuinely concerned about you. You sound extremely stressed," I said, pausing before adding with perfectly calibrated innocence. "Maybe the house just doesn't like strangers staying there." Silence stretched for 10 seconds. When Kelly finally spoke again, her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I know this was you. Somehow, some way, you orchestrated this whole nightmare. Me." I laughed gently. "Kelly, I was here in San Diego all night. How could I possibly control systems at the villa from 200 miles away? You're some kind of tech genius now, is that it?" Actually, Derek was a tech genius, but I saw no reason to enlighten her about my collaborative advantages. "Sweetheart, I can barely operate my television remote. You know that." Kelly's breathing grew ragged as she struggled to grasp the impossibility of her suspicions. "The police said everything appeared normal when they arrived." "There you go. Must have been a power surge or something. A power surge that lasted 8 hours, creating voices and moving shadows." I allowed a note of gentle concern to enter my voice. "Kelly, are you sure you didn't imagine some of these things? Stress can cause hallucinations. You know hallucinations." The word exploded from her throat. 4 people had the same hallucinations simultaneously. Group hysteria is a documented psychological phenomenon. Kelly's strangled sob was audible through the connection. "For 3 years, I'd been the one making desperate phone calls, begging for understanding, only to receive dismissive responses. The symmetry was deeply satisfying. 'We're never coming back,' she declared, trying to inject strength into her shaking voice. Never. The villa is yours. We don't want anything to do with that cursed place. That's probably wise, I agreed mildly. Sometimes houses develop personalities, especially when they feel their boundaries have been violated. You can't get away with this. Somehow we'll prove it was you. Prove what exactly? That you had a bad night involving what the police determined was a technical malfunction. Kelly's silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the hollow quality of complete defeat. I underestimated you. You underestimated a lot of things, Kelly. This isn't over. Actually, I said quietly, I think it is. You got exactly what you asked for. A night in my villa. I hope the experience was educational. The line went dead. I sat back in my leather chair, setting the phone gently on my desk beside the still glowing monitors showing the empty villa. 8 years of construction experience had taught me that the most elegant solutions were often the simplest. Kelly had tried to take my property through psychological manipulation and emotional terrorism. I had simply returned the favor, using superior technology and strategic patience. The phone began ringing again almost immediately. Kelly's name on the display. I turned it off. Tuesday morning brought confirmation of my predictions. Through the villa's camera system, I watched Palmer's rental truck pull into the driveway at 10 o'clock sharp, loaded with locksmith equipment and a confident expression that wouldn't last long. From my study in San Diego, I observed him approach the front door with professional tools, clearly believing that changing a few locks would solve their villa problem. The locksmith Palmer had hired looked skeptical even before examining Derek's integrated security system. Within 30 minutes, both men stood scratching their heads in obvious confusion. These aren't regular locks, sir, the locksmith's voice carried clearly through the audio pickup. They're integrated smart home systems, biometric scanners, wireless connectivity, backup power supplies. Palmer's face darkened as he studied the sophisticated hardware. Can't you just replace them anyway? Not without reprogramming the entire security network. The locksmith packed his tools with the efficiency of someone eager to leave. That's way beyond my scope. You'd need a tech specialist who understands home automation systems. And Derek Collins was the only such specialist within 200 miles who had intimate knowledge of this particular installation. I made a mental note to thank him again for his thorough work. Palmer stood alone in my villa's entryway after the locksmith drove away, his shoulders sagging under the weight of tactical defeat. Through the camera, I watched him kick futilely at the doorframe before returning to his truck for the long drive back to San Diego. The rest of my Tuesday passed in pleasant anticipation. Kelly would receive Palmer's failure report around 4 o'clock. By evening, desperation would bring them to my doorstep for a final confrontation. 30 years of managing construction projects had taught me to recognize when opponents realized they were outmaneuvered. At 8 o'clock p.m., I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Through the window, I watched Kelly and Palmer approach my front door with the aggressive posture of people who had exhausted all rational options. Kelly's first knock rattled the doorframe. "Open up. We need to talk." I opened the door calmly, noting Kelly's flushed face and Palmer's clenched fists. "Good evening. How was your day?" "Cut the innocent act." Kelly pushed past me into my entryway. "Palmer could indeed change the locks because you've turned the villa into some kind of high-tech fortress. Smart home security is becoming quite popular," I observed mildly. "Very effective against unauthorized access." Palmer stepped closer, trying to use his height for intimidation. "Either you stop this ridiculous game and give us the villa, or forget you have a daughter." "Is that supposed to be a threat or a promise?" Kelly's eyes blazed with fury. "We'll find a way to prove your guilt in court. We'll sue you for harassment, emotional distress, everything." "Based on what evidence?" "A police report that found no illegal activity." "You know what you did." Kelly's voice cracked with frustration. "Somehow you orchestrated that whole nightmare, and we'll prove it." I leaned against my doorframe, completely relaxed. "Prove that you experienced what the police determined was a technical malfunction." "Good luck with that." Palmer tried a different approach. "Look, Fred, be reasonable. You're old and alone. What do you really need with such a big villa? The exact words Kelly had used during our phone confrontation. No original material there. Interesting perspective from people who tried to steal my property without permission. Kelly's control snapped completely. Fine. You want to play hardball. You'll never see any grandchildren. When I have kids, they'll never know their grandfather existed. You'll die alone and forgotten, just like Mom. The cruelty of invoking Elizabeth's memory should have wounded me. 3 years ago, it would have sent me into tearful apologies and desperate bargaining. Now, it simply confirmed what I'd already concluded about my daughter's character, the same way she forgot to ask permission before giving away my villa. This isn't over. Kelly's voice rose to a shriek. We'll destroy you. We'll ruin your reputation. Turn everyone against you. By the time we're finished, you'll wish you'd just given us the villa. Palmer nodded aggressively. She's right. We have friends, connections. We'll make your life miserable. I studied their faces with clinical detachment. Kelly, the daughter I'd raised and sacrificed for now, promising to destroy me for refusing to surrender my life's work. Palmer, the son-in-law I'd welcomed into the family, threatening social warfare because his parents couldn't steal my home. Are you quite finished? Kelly stepped closer, her face twisted with malice. We're just getting started. You have no idea what we're capable of. Actually, I said, voice low and steady, I had a very clear idea. Their capabilities extended to psychological manipulation, theft attempts, and vicious personal attacks. But they had already deployed every weapon in their arsenal, and I remained standing. More importantly, they had just handed me all the justification I needed for the final solution I'd been contemplating since yesterday's phone call. Well, I said quietly, I suppose we'll see who's more capable. Something in my tone made Palmer step backward. Kelly hesitated, perhaps realizing her threats had achieved something she hadn't intended. We're leaving, she announced, trying to regain control. But this conversation isn't over. Actually, I replied, watching them retreat toward their car. I think it is. I closed the door and walked back to my study, where Elizabeth's photograph waited patiently on my desk. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll make some calls. Marcus Chen first, then a few other professional contacts. Kelly thought she understood warfare. She was about to learn the difference between tactics and strategy. Wednesday morning brought the moment I'd been orchestrating since Kelly's first phone call. At 10 a.m., I sat in Bradley Walsh's conference room, watching my daughter and her accomplices file through the door with the aggressive confidence of people who believed they held winning cards. Bradley, my trusted notary for 15 years, had prepared everything according to my Tuesday night instructions. Legal documents lay spread across the polished table, like evidence in a trial which, in many ways, this was. Kelly took the chair directly across from me, jaw set with determination. All right, Dad, we're here to resolve this villa situation once and for all. Palmer positioned himself beside her, arms crossed in what he probably thought was an intimidating pose. Carl and Margaret Thompson settled into chairs along the wall, their expressions mixing hope with lingering trauma from Sunday's technological experience. I appreciate everyone coming, I said calmly. Bradley has some important information to share. Kelly's eyes narrowed. Cut the formalities. We want the villa transferred to Palmer's parents immediately. No more games. No more delays. Actually, I replied, I'm afraid that's impossible. Palmer leaned forward aggressively. Nothing's impossible if you just sign the papers. We've been patient long enough. You misunderstand. I gestured to Bradley, who cleared his throat with professional precision. I no longer own the villa. Silence stretched for 10 seconds. Kelly's face began changing color. What exactly does that mean? Palmer demanded. Bradley opened the top folder on his desk. Mr. Martinez transferred ownership of the Lake Tahoe property to the Second Chance Foundation for homeless assistance. The transfer was completed Monday morning and is completely legal. Kelly's voice cracked like breaking glass. That's impossible. You had no right. I had every right to transfer property I owned, I said quietly. Everything is legally documented and irreversible. Palmer's confident posture collapsed. But we had an agreement. Kelly said the villa was ours. Bradley's professional tone never wavered. Mr. Martinez can only transfer property he actually owns. The foundation owns the villa now. Kelly shot to her feet, chairs scraping against the floor. You can't do this to us. We need that villa. You tried to steal it, I observed. This seemed like a more appropriate solution. Margaret Thompson's voice wavered with confusion. What does this mean for us? Where will we live? You'll have to make other arrangements. I said, just as you expected me to do when you tried to evict me from my own property. Kelly's hands trembled as she gripped the table edge. This is just spite, pure revenge. This is justice. I met her eyes steadily, and it's permanent. Palmer's face had gone ashen as the financial implications hit him. Our plans, our future. We counted on that villa to solve our problems. Perhaps you should have asked permission before making those plans. Bradley spread additional documents across the table. The charitable transfer includes a lifetime usage clause for Mr. Martinez as the donor. He retains full access to the property until his death. Then nothing changes for you. Kelly's voice climbed toward hysteria. You still get to use it. Everything changes, I corrected. You no longer have any claim to it ever. Carl Thompson spoke for the first time, voice small and confused. So, we get nothing after everything. After attempting to steal my property through psychological manipulation and threats. That's correct. Kelly sank back into her chair, the fight draining from her face as the reality settled in. When did you do this? Monday morning, I said. Immediately after your technological experience. The timing hit her like a physical blow Monday, after the villa incident, but before their confrontation at my house. Every threat, every demand, every cruel word had been meaningless from the moment she'd spoken them. Palmer's voice was barely a whisper. You were always planning this. I was always planning to protect my property from people who thought they could take it through manipulation and intimidation. Kelly stared at the legal documents as though they might dissolve under her gaze. The charity thing, that's just a trick, right? Some way to maintain control. Bradley answered before I could. The Second Chance Foundation is a legitimate charitable organization. The transfer is genuine and irrevocable. So, you win, Palmer said bitterly. Is that what you wanted to hear? I wanted to hear nothing from any of you. But since you insisted on this, Conflictious, I win. Kelly's composure finally cracked completely. You've destroyed our future. Palmer's parents have nowhere to go. They can go anywhere except my villa. Margaret Thompson began crying quietly. Carl patted her shoulder helplessly like a man who never understood how they arrived at this moment. Kelly stood on unsteady legs, confident aggression replaced by hollow defeat. Come on, there's nothing left to discuss. As they filed toward the door, I called out one final observation. Kelly. She turned back, face a mask of exhaustion and rage. Next time you try to manipulate someone, remember, this business experience beats emotional terrorism every time. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Bradley and I sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the legal documents that had just ended a war I'd never wanted to fight. Masterfully planned, Fred, Bradley said finally. 30 years of construction contracts taught me to always have an exit strategy. I gathered my copies of the documents and walked toward the door. Time to drive up to Lake Tahoe and enjoy my villa in complete peace. Thursday morning brought the first sunrise in 3 years I could watch without fear, anger, or defensive calculation. I drove to Lake Tahoe through California's spring landscape, feeling something I'd almost forgotten existed, simple contentment. The villa welcomed me with the silence of a house that belonged once again entirely to its rightful occupant. I used my key without checking over my shoulder, entered without listening for hostile voices, walked through rooms that held memories of recent technological warfare, but felt somehow cleansed. My first task was restoration. Derek's cameras came down easily, their sophisticated mounting hardware yielding to basic tools and determined purpose. Motion sensors, voice assistants, projection systems each component of our elaborate revenge theater, got carefully packed into boxes for return to my helpful neighbor. Within 2 hours, the villa had returned to its natural state. No blinking lights, no hidden microphones, no technological defenses monitoring invisible approaches. Just a house by a lake owned by a charitable foundation, occupied by a man who no longer needed to protect himself from his own family. I made coffee using the same machine that had witnessed Sunday's chaos, then carried my mug to the terrace where Elizabeth and I had shared countless peaceful mornings. The lake stretched before me, its surface reflecting the late morning sun in patterns that seemed to dance with possibility rather than threat. For the first time since my wife's death, I sat completely still. The transformation felt almost mystical in its completeness. 3 years ago, I'd been a broken widower who confused love with surrender, kindness with weakness, family loyalty with accepting abuse. The man who had built a construction empire from nothing had somehow forgotten how to protect his own boundaries. Elizabeth's voice whispered through memory clearer now, unfiltered by grief and manipulation. "Be patient with Kelly," she'd said. "She's processing her loss." But Elizabeth had never meant for patience to become permanent victim. She'd never suggested that love required accepting theft, manipulation, and psychological terrorism. The woman who demarried a determined businessman wouldn't have wanted him to become a doormat, even for their daughter. "Kindness without self-respect isn't kindness," I said aloud to the empty terrace. "It's just weakness disguised as virtue." The mountain peaks surrounding the lake seemed to nod agreement. Nature itself demonstrated boundaries. Waters stayed within their shores. Mountains maintained their foundations. Seasons changed according to their own rhythms, regardless of human demands. Kelly had spent 3 years testing my boundaries, discovering they could be moved, dissolved, ignored entirely. Each successful manipulation had taught her that love meant capitulation, that family ties guaranteed unlimited access to everything I owned or earned. I taught her that lesson through my own behavior every check I'd written, every demand I'd accepted, every time I'd chosen temporary peace over lasting respect. The technological revenge had been satisfying, but ultimately unnecessary. The real victory was simpler and more permanent. Learning to say no. Learning that protecting myself wasn't cruelty, but health. Learning that some relationships cannot survive the introduction of genuine boundaries. My phone remained silent for 24 hours. No frantic calls from Kelly. No threats from Palmer. No desperate attempts to find loopholes in the charitable transfer. They'd finally understood what I discovered in Bradley's office. The war was over, and they had lost completely. But more important than their defeat was my recovery. The grieving widower, who had mistaken exploitation for love, was gone. In his place sat a man who remembered his own worth, who understood that genuine kindness required strength, not weakness. Elizabeth would have been proud not of the revenge, perhaps, but of the self-respect of the man who had rediscovered that protecting himself was an act of love. Love for her memory, love for his own dignity, love for the possibility that relationships built on mutual respect might still exist somewhere in his future. The afternoon sun warmed my face as I finished my coffee and considered the strange mathematics of family. Kelly had calculated that emotional manipulation plus financial pressure would equal permanent access to my assets. She'd never considered that trauma plus time plus strategic thinking might equal a father who finally learned to protect himself. Lake Tahoe's eternal calm reflected a truth I was finally ready to accept. Some battles end, not with reconciliation, but with the understanding that peace requires distance. Some love expresses itself through boundaries rather than surrender. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again. If you like this revenge story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Take care, and see you in the next video.